All right, we are good to go.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'd like to call the July 13th, 2023 special called Audit and Finance Committee meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is item 1B, which is the adoption of the agenda. I'm sure everybody's had a chance to read it. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. The meeting is forward. We will move on to item 2A, which is a second reading of the FY24 budget as to address concerns raised in the last Audit and Finance meeting. Ms. Carlin, your show.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. Stephen, can you pull up the PowerPoint? Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Oh, thank you. That's much better. I've got the wrong date on there, y'all, but it's supposed to be the 13th. I just realized that because it's in big letters in front of me. Can you go to the next slide? And so last night we presented we went over the first reading of the budget, which was board adopted on June 20th. And then yesterday at the public hearing, we went through the second reading. The results from the last Audit and Finance Committee was to come back and present two additional scenarios. The first scenario eliminates the draw on fund balance, which would need a 13 mil increase. And we can talk about that more later in the slides, because I don't believe that we truly need a 13 mil increase to eliminate the draw on fund balance. And then the fourth column over is the scenario where we would bring all classified staff up to 100% market, which would be an additional $5 million to the budget that we're working with now. And to do that would be an additional 10.3 mils. Not to confuse everybody, but that includes the 8.3. So really it's an additional 2 mil on top of the 8.3 to do that. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so the difference between the last two scenarios is the first line where it says human resources, non-teacher, 5.5% COLA increase. So I did not include the 100% market in the 13 mil increase. And the reason why is because that would force us to max out our allowable millage limitation. That would bring it to 15.1. I personally don't feel that is the right choice. I don't get the feeling that's the direction the board wants to go. But that's just, me stating that as your CFO. The only other thing that changed was the way that we produce the strategies to balance. If we're going to increase millage to eliminate the draw on fund balance, then we took out under strategies to balance section, we took out the mid-year spending freeze. That is still in fund balance, but we wouldn't use that to actually balance the budget. We also took out the $5.7 million for the use of fund balance and additional FY23 savings. That is still in the fund balance, but it wouldn't be used to balance the budget. And then under use of fund balance, you see a negative 406,000. That's just to make everything balance back to zero. We actually have a surplus that we would add back into fund balance to do this particular scenario. And then on the 10.3 mil, we would still need all of these measures to balance the budget. Just like we've been showing in the second reading. However, the only difference is adding the additional 2.5% cost of living adjustment to the classified staff. Is any questions on these two scenarios that we just talked about or that we just were presented? I can't see everybody, so.
Does the committee have any questions? Any from the members of the committee?
So if we did the 10.3 without going to the 100% and staying at 2.5, we got to get us back down to You said it was 5 million, so we only need 700,000 to balance out from there.
I'm sorry, I did not follow the numbers. I'm sorry, Calhoun, Mr. Calhoun, say that again.
We were to do instead of raising to the 100% and staying at the 2.5, we did the 10.3 million, the 10.3 mil increase, then we will only need 700,000 to balance the budget.
700,000.
So
No.
No, we would actually balance the budget with the 10.3 mil increase and factoring in the full 5.5% cost of living adjustment for classified staff.
Just so I understand, when you say we would balance if we make these draws on the fund balance, you mean? Can we leave that schedule up just so we're all looking at the same?
Yeah.
That is what we're projecting. And in another slide, we're going to show you that we do project to use fund balance to balance the budget, but very seldom do we ever have to use it. And I can go into more specific reasons as to why.
And when you say we use, it's basically a projection. It's an anticipated possibility, which
Based upon what we know right now. Mhm.
right, based upon what you know right now, it's like an insurance policy.
So under the strategies to balance, we have elimination of departmental positions, non-salary budget reductions. Are these proposed positions that would be eliminated, or are these actual positions already in place that would have to be eliminated in order to balance the budget?
No,
And
these are things that have already taken place. For example, the mid-year spending, the 2.7, we already did that in advance to make sure that we didn't have to use fund balance at year end. And those mostly came from purchase services accounts and supply accounts. It did not impact schools at all. It was just central office cuts. Same with the elimination of the departmental positions, that $3.2 million. Those were positions that had been vacant for not only this year for an extended period of time, but out to 2 years, maybe 3 years. None of those positions were school-based. They were all central office positions. That's already been done.
But they are vacant positions, not people that would have to be terminated.
Yes,
If
ma'am,
I'm
that is
understanding
correct.
you.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is
And
correct.
then the non-salary budget reductions, what type of items are included in that category?
So what we did with that, there again, it was schools were not impacted. It was just central office budgets from their purchase services accounts as well as supply accounts. And how we managed that is we looked at a 3-year, actually a 4-year historical spend. But we left out COVID year, which I believe, and correct me, was that FY 19 or 20 that we left out for when we were looking at?
Did you, I haven't seen the thing. I gave it to you, but if you left it out,
Okay.
20 was the COVID year though.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we looked at
40, yeah, because it was like 40 something million or something like that.
Thank you. So we looked at 19, we skipped over 20, even though we included it, just so people could see the number, we didn't include it. We looked at 21 and 22 and also 23, and we tried to eliminate additional funding that was budgeted that we just were not spending, that we could clearly see were not being spent. And so that came up to be about $7.5 million in purchase services and supplies at the central office level. Does that answer your question, Ms. Stamp?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie or Mr. Grabowski, can I make a quick comment?
Go ahead, Bill.
I just want to make sure in the grouping when we talk about the 5.5% COLA for the non-teachers, and at one point Jackie said classified employees. So that particular group that's all of the non-teachers. So some of those employees could be certified like a principal or assistant principal at a school. It would include teacher assistant. So it's everybody who's not on the teacher salary schedule. I just want to make sure, because I've heard different terminology about that group. So it is classified and certified, but they're just non-teachers.
Thank you, Bill.
Jackie,
Thank
would
you.
you mind if I added a little bit more discussion on the non-labor reductions related to operations?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So related to that 7.5 million in non-labor facility or operations, that's about 4.1 million of the 7.5. And that includes a reduction in grass cutting of all of our facilities, includes a reduction in power washing. It includes a reduction in if the transportation contractor meets all of their runs, we owe them a bonus. They have not met those runs, but we're taking that funding away. If the contractor meets all their runs and we have to pay that bonus, we will be short in the budget. So those are just a few things that we worked hard on. We believe that it is minimal impact and it doesn't affect life safety.
Jeff, Ms. Bowery, which line item was that?
I'm sorry, that's a 7.5 million non-labor cut. Non-labor budget reductions. Non-salary budget reductions.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jack, Ms. Carlin, I have a question on, we keep talking about market study and market evaluation. I'm used to compensation evaluation. When was the last market evaluation done that we keep talking about?
I would have to defer to Bill Brigman to answer that question.
I can answer that question. So Mr. Grabowski, the study was finalized in the winter of 2014. The recommendation came to the board, I think in February or March of 2014. Fox Lawson was the company that was used. It was a classification and compensation study. So it looked at all job descriptions. It looked at positions as far as being exempt or non-exempt, et cetera. Since that point, let me back up. The board agreed to give, I believe it was $8.5 million to roll out the recommendations from Fox Lawson in an attempt to get to 100% of market that was recommended. The funds allowed us to basically get to 95% of market at the time. We continue to work with this group. Fox Lawson was absorbed by Gallagher. So we have the same consultant that did a study from years ago who works with us on an annual basis and has continued to maintain the study as far as any kind of maintenance or any groups that we needed to look at over time.
So we're working on a 2014 base, and then we have a company that's worked for us for over 10 years that has just been updating that base.
So yes,
so we haven't had any fresh eyes look at this. This is the same company doing something. So this is like having an auditor work for you for 10 years.
So the board awarded they hired this company back in that 2014 time period. We've continued to work with that same group over time. It is now owned by Gallagher. So he's continued to do any market studies we've asked for. So I have not brought in another firm to review it. That's correct.
And this contract comes up, how's this contract come up for board approval or recommendation? I mean, how's this fall under audit and finance? I mean, does audit and finance have control over this type of issue?
If I understand correctly, initially went through a procurement process. We interviewed, I can't remember how many firms to conduct this study. We have done this in my tenure here in the district, I think 3 different times. And this is the last time we have put it out for bid, and we just continue to maintain this relationship. Some of the audit and finance members know, who've been on the committee for a while, know that we have brought the consultant in to speak about different areas or positions, specifically most recently like in IT, where we were struggling to fill IT vacancies, competing with private market, but I've not put it out for bid to completely conduct another study. I will tell you, a study this size and the size of our district is very involved and took the better part of a year to complete.
Well, you and I will differ on that because I know other districts that are doing it right now, and I know how long it's taken, what their proposals are. So that's for another day. I was just curious as to when this one started. But we'll have that discussion soon. That's for another day. Any further questions from the committee?
So just to clarify, are you saying that we've had a contract with this vendor for 10 years without going back out to bid?
That's what he's saying.
Not as well. Let me explain. We had a contract with them to complete a study, which occurred. We got the results in 2014. After we rolled out the study, we continued to ask the consultant to help us maintain the data over time. So we didn't see a need to go out and hire another group to do yet another study. We have never rolled this out 100%.
Bill, just order of magnitude, and you may not know this off the top of your head, but I'm guessing the initial year study is more expensive because they do the more thorough analysis, but then this annual update that they're providing is probably much less expensive. Is that accurate? Do you have a sense of what the rough numbers we're talking about?
If I recall correctly, the initial study was around 130, maybe 160,000. Yes, sir. We just have him on kind of a retainer based on, he trained our folks in our compensation department that Rob Bowers leads. Rob's very competent in this. And if there are things that arise that we have concerns about, we reach out to the consultant. Or as recent as 2020, we actually had them do another review based on the data from 2014. It was not as thorough as bringing in employees and employee groups to be interviewed and complete PDQs, which is part of the process, and review job descriptions. I think we have a very good baseline.
Got it.
I think my concern is that, obviously compensation versus, market, analysis are two totally different things. I know we're required to do compensation and take that all into and not worry about markets. So I like I said, I think this is to be, looked at a later date as to something that we need to, rather than basing numbers on something that may not really be as accurate as what we should be looking at. And I agree. The numbers, what I have found in the past is sometimes it goes up. The picture that we're looking at is a lot worse than being represented. But
yeah, we have a department, and we're willing, if that's the will of the board and superintendent, to conduct another study. And we really need to pull in the cost of housing. I think that's shifted a lot since.
Sure.
I do think the market study will drive the compensation. So I do think that it plays into the established compensation. It's just whether we're using good baseline data,
right,
or should that, is it time to update that baseline?
Any further questions from the committee on the presentation at this point by Ms. Carlin?
Ms. Carlin, were you going to we're going to go through the last page or two on the use of fund balance?
Yeah, I had tried.
Yeah, we just stopped.
I attended on, yes. Okay.
Please proceed, Ms. Carlin.
Okay, thank you, sir. One more slide, Stephen. Okay, so this is where we talk about fund balance. One more. I'm sorry, go back one more, Stephen. There we go. Okay, so one of the things we keep talking about is the concern with using fund balance to not only balance the budget, but one of the things we want to talk about is the fact that we're not using the budgeted use of fund balance by the time we reach year end. And so looking at the 13 mil increase, if you looked at the halfway down, there's a line projected fund balance as of June 30th, 2023. That number has not changed across all these scenarios. So we're still at 166.6 million. But one of the things that we do know that is happening in the very near future, and some of it has happened, is the legal liability that we reduced fund balance by for 7 million. And so that's going to bring projected fund balance in this particular scenario. It's going to bring projected fund balance down to 160 million. And that is because, the more you raise revenues and taxes, the more money you're going to put into your fund balance if your revenues come in higher than your expenditures. And so with that, we always include at the bottom our fund balance requirement, because one, it keeps us in check to make sure that we're following our own policy, because there are implications if we don't. And so with this particular, when you look at the first reading and the second reading, we are following our own policy. Our fund balance projection at June 30th is for both 23 and 24 is higher than our fund balance requirement. The same thing with the 13 mil increase as well as the 10 mil increase. We still are able to end the year with a higher fund balance than our requirement. And so go to the next slide, please. So this is the one slide that we changed this morning after speaking with Dr. Gallion last night. And what we want to show is not only have we continuously been able to build our fund balance over the years, and I attribute that to just we do monthly financial updates. Staff is constantly paying attention to what's going on with additional requests that are not in the budget. We try to keep track of those so that we know what's being added, whether it's an additional teacher because enrollment has increased, which y'all know about that because of the enrollment projections that the dollar amount we put in the budget for that. But we also we do a good job of keeping track of what is going on in our expenditures and as well as our revenues. So with that, we're still projecting for FY23 to end the year with a fund balance of 166.6 million. Looking at the different statutes, the state statute only requires 1 month of general fund operating expenditures of the 2 completed fiscal years. And so if we were following that, the required fund balance would be approximately $72 million. And as you can tell, we're way above that. But our actual policy, DFAC, is based on GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association best practice. And their recommendation is to maintain a minimum of 150%, which is really what we showed on the prior slide, which is the 2 months average operating expenditures per policy. And so the requirement to follow our own policy would be to end the fiscal year with a fund balance of 143.6. And based upon what you can see on this slide, our projection is going to be 166 million. So what I'm trying to say is we are well above the requirement of about $23 million. And I hope that gives, let's just pause on that, because I hope that gives not only Audit and Finance Committee, but our board members that are concerned about this, I hope that gives you reassurance that we are paying attention and we do handle this fund balance with as much care as possible. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Ms. Carlin, so now in your forecasting going forward, we now are projecting a substantial increase in our expenses that are permanent, with the 5,000 across the board, starting teaching salaries, and which, I hope we continue to look at next year and focus on getting the starting teacher salaries even higher. We have the COLA going in right now at the 2.5. And, trying to figure out historical, data over 5-year trends going back. As I look at this going back, look at FY19, the big change from FY19 to F20. And then, I think about going forward 5 years. I know it's almost impossible to do, but maybe it's not impossible to do. Is that something you take into account? Because,
Yes, we have a 3-year, multi-year projection. We haven't presented it probably in the last few weeks because there have been so many changes that we just paused until we knew we had a good understanding of where the board was headed with a millage increase and with teacher increases. We paused on that. And so one of the things that I know Mr. Griffin loves to see and is probably going to ask for is, where are we on our multi-year financial update? And so that is something that we will be working on in the near future, because one of the things I don't know as we start talking about these taking the non-teaching staff to 100% market, I don't know what that looks like to maintain that group at 100% market. And so I haven't had any conversations with Bill and his team about this. I know what the cost is this year, but I don't know what it's going to cost to maintain that and keep them at that, moving forward. So that's, something that we would definitely want to include in our multi-year projection if the board is interested or passes this on Monday to do this.
I think that's critical. I mean, it's like my fear with the stamp tax revenue ending, in the near future. We're 1 year out from looking at it or reporting to it on our projections. And if you look at it, you run the projections 1 year out and you see the loss of all that stamp revenue, and I'm really looking forward to meeting with Mr. Bowery, trying to figure out how we're going to justify, starting to work immediately on getting a referendum in place to keep that revenue coming in, for the long-term goals of, capital projects. I still think we have to take almost the same approach with this, knowing that, what we are doing with these FTEs and COLA increases really affects this multiple year update. It's fine to look at it 1 year out, but you start looking at 2 and 3. It's the same thing if in 6 years or 5 years of losing the stamp tax, and then suddenly we're going to the millage on everyone on their homeowners, to if we need to on capital projects. So I think the multiple. I would agree with Mr. Griffin. Yeah, multi-year update is pretty critical in considering this. But I thank you very much. I mean, it's a good historical report.
A question around the COLA. So how was the 2.5% determined for the COLA? I know like other state agencies are receiving, say, a 5% COLA increase. So this district is receiving a 2.5%. So do you look at what the state is?
Staff, yes.
Is the 2.5% for non-teacher staff? Or
yes, the increase for the teachers, the $5,000, that was way above the 2.5%.
The state required the 2.5% COLA for everyone.
Okay, so they give a different COLA percentage for the district than they do for other state agencies.
Yes. Yeah, the State Department did not require us to give, only required us to give a $2,500 increase to teachers. And there was, I don't remember the exact percentage, I'd have to look it up, but there was a certain percentage for bus drivers. And we only have a few bus drivers left because we, contract that out. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't a requirement set by the state to give non-teachers an increase. We factored in the 2.5% in a step because that's, customarily what we've done.
Because Ms. Carlin, when I look at the, millage increases over the years, going to FY19, it was 3.36, and then the fund balance due to obviously some incredible work by staff went up, and then FY20 we had a millage rate increase of 4.29.
I think he froze.
And it leveled off, and then am I frozen?
You were. Could you just do you mind repeating? Sorry.
This is what happens when you work on a 80-year-old ship. The internet is unstable. I don't know where. Anyway, I'm looking at the millage increases that we've historically done over the last 5 years, and with the exception of 2023, which we were 7.7, they've always been 3.4, 3.2, 7, and it must be a credit to staff. I look at the fund balance and it continues to go up. Mm-hmm. Now, I do know that we did take the radical step increasing teacher salary across the board for all teachers at 5,000, and that's making a huge impact. But it would be nice to have had the history of the millage rate as it applies to the fund balance. But anyway, it's just an interesting observation.
Okay. Don, were you wanting to say something earlier? I saw you.
I was just going to make a comment on Ms. Stamp's question about how do we get to 2.5%. So I don't think Ms. Stamps is like looking at a rate that was published rate. What the intent was to maintain the studies parameters that Bill talked about, and that the last board adopted, that we maintain 97% of market. So with the step increase for employees, that category of employees, it took 2.5% to get to that 97% of market. Is that right, Bill?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
So Bill, if I understand Mr. Kennedy, then what's being said is that the state didn't require us to do the 2.5% COLA?
The 2.5% COLA, no, sir, the state did not require. The state doesn't govern other employees beyond teachers.
Got it.
So that was based on CPI and to maintain that 97%.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Okay. Should I move on to the next slide?
Any further questions from the committee on this slide? Hearing none, Ms. Carlin, please proceed.
Thank you. So this is a chart that I was talking about earlier that shows our budgeted fund balance versus what we actually use. And it goes back to fiscal year 19. And as you can see, the actual use of fund balance is at the very bottom in a bright yellow line, and it's at 0. And what that represents is that all these years that we have balanced the use of fund balance to make sure we present a balanced budget to the board and that it is adopted. All these years that we have done that, we have not had to use fund balance. And so that, when I hear, all these concerns about maintaining fund balance, Mr. Kennedy or Don and I felt like this was real important to present, that we do understand your concern. We do hear you, but we also wanted to show that even though we budget for it to use it, we have not had to use it because of other instances where we just haven't had to use it, where it was additional revenues that came in that we weren't aware of or didn't budget for, salaries and fringe savings on our vacancies, which a majority of that is school vacancies, classroom vacancies. And so with that, I just wanted to share that with y'all so that you knew that even though we budget for it, we've not actually had to use it up to this point.
So what is the likelihood that we will have the same model going into this next year?
I feel really good that we will go into FY24 not having to use the fund balance that we've budgeted. We may have a couple of surprises along the way. And when I say surprises, I mean, it could be $1 million, maybe 1.5 million. But with the financial updates, and this, I try very hard to make sure everyone knows what's going on. And if there's any surprises around the corner that are concerning to staff, just because of historically, we see these things. So if I start to see things taking a turn in November, December, the Audit and Finance Committee will be the first to know as well. Sorry, Dr. Gallion will be the first to know, and then Audit and Finance Committee and the board.
So if
I don't foresee us using 100% of the fund balance that we have budgeted in the FY24 budget, but we have to provide a balanced budget
right
for board adoption.
So that's whether we go with the 10.3 or the 8.3.
Well, I am concerned about adding an additional $5 million for the staff, the non-teaching staff. I am concerned about that, not knowing out years what that's going to do. But if we stay with the second reading, the 8.3 that we presented yesterday in the public hearing, yes, I feel very, very confident about that budget, that we will be okay. And we will not have to use 100% of the fund balance that we've budgeted for.
Thank you.
Ms. Carlin, this is why I think it also is helpful. I mean, I think this graph is excellent. I think it was a well thought out idea to present it this way. But when you look at what was happening during those 5 years, that's why, you know, knowing how the millage rate increases that we've added on, you know, have built into the extra revenue that has been brought in, that has allowed us not to have to draw down on the fund balance, even though we do have the requirement of, you know, potentially using it as an insurance to give you the balance budget. So I do appreciate this graph. But I still think, you know, tying it into, when we look at historical data, we need to really also consider, you know, the millage rate increases that we've done in the past. So, because that's what this meeting's about, is raising the millage rate. And I do agree with you. I think without knowing that multi-year effect of 3 years out of what we've already committed to and what we're planning on trying to do next year with teacher salaries, I think your concern is very valid.
And then not to forget, you know, this ESSER funding cliff that we're going to be facing. That's a concern as well. So.
Yeah, so Ms. Carlin, it seems like two factors in particular over the past few years have been helpful in well, three factors. One is you and Mr. Kennedy and the team's work in making sure that we are good stewards. That's been helpful, obviously. But the ESSER funding, you know, has been a part of the revenues, and our unfortunate difficulty in having teachers in place, you know, at a fully staffed rate has helped the fund balance. And so I'm obviously very hopeful that with the increase in pay that we'll keep more teachers in place. But that could make it harder for us to realize the savings relative to budget that we've experienced the last few years, especially.
That's true, because there's a lot of expenditures that typically were in general operating fund that we were able to pay out of ESSER funding. And so you're correct. That has helped us as well build our fund balance.
And I think to start the new year off running on a deep dive of the ESSER effect and potential effect, and, you know, evaluating how these funds were being spent. Because theoretically, if ESSER was handled correctly, we wouldn't be having this argument as to affecting the 24-25 budget. Because at ESSER, if you follow the guidelines of ESSER's, everything was supposed to be a sustainability without going into your GIF, your operating funds. So that'll be an interesting, you know, evaluation when we look into how ESSER was doing, what's done, and what we've actually gotten, or what the students have gotten for what we spent the money on. So it should never have had an effect on our general operating fund. So that's what concerns me more when we put aside money on something that shouldn't be there, like the 22 million to sustain, you know, projects. So it was supposed to be sustainable. Anyway.
Ms. Carlin, when would you expect us to have an ability to see this 3-year projection?
Let's see. If we had it for the August 1st Audit and Finance Committee meeting, would that be, we could do that. We could have it by then. I'm afraid if I promise before then, that could be an issue for us. We're in the middle of year end. We're in the middle of just some other things that are taking staff away from that piece of it. But we could have something on the August 1st Audit and Finance Committee meeting.
I think we should, for next year, to the extent there's any learning opportunity, if there's any way for us to build into this process, and I know it's very difficult when we run 35 different scenarios, but
Yes, it is.
but even if we, even on a scenario or a base scenario, laying out the 3-year impact, because I think it's, less prudent of us as a committee and ultimately for the board to have to make a decision on both the compensation changes as well as the budget itself and millage changes without having, as Mr. Grabowski said, I think, the 1-year impact is very important and that's what we're approving or not. But really what matters most in our long-term fiscal health, obviously, is what the trajectories look like on our 3-year plan. I know I've said that a bunch, but.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I agree. I hope we never get to the point that we're not looking more than 2 models. And I think that's when we start in September, that's what the goal is in, moving forward and taking this information so that you can limit it to only having 2 models at the end of the day. But, we obviously are going to have to really look at what the impact, this is why I really feel that to take us to the next level of salary increases next year is going to require something else. So without that 3-year impact and then other things that we're going to have to be looking at, it's tough to make a decision.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Grabowski, Anita Huggins here. If we could revisit your comment prior to Mr. Griffith's question a second ago about ESSER, I just want to make sure I understood. You stated that I think the intent of ESSER being not including items that weren't sustainable. Could you restate that just so I can make sure to offer any clarification around that if needed?
Sure. My understanding with the ESSER funds on everything, it was supposed to be anything that we developed when you looked at it, and this is the fear whenever you fund FTEs with, grant funding, is that once that funding goes away, you have to have had some sustainability, plan in place where it's not affecting, your budgets and everything. So as I understand it, when looking at it, and this is with any grant funding, the second you take that grant, you need to know that that funding's ending. You run the risk when you hire FTEs under it that you don't have the money, and that shouldn't be affecting your general operating fund. You're expanding everything. And that's what I get concerned with, is that we've been using ESSER to expand our programs. Some may work, some may not work, without doing a deep dive into ESSER. And I have to rely heavily on you and the staff, and I do rely heavily on staff because I don't live and breathe this budget. I live and breathe other budgets, but I don't live and breathe this budget. If I did, I'd have a much better understanding. I wouldn't be asking silly questions or, having you always have to be defensive about my opinions on ESSER. But I'm just looking at the big picture on ESSER. It wasn't to create this monster and I'm not saying we have a monster. I don't know. That's why I think this deep dive into ESSER and the effect on the budget is so important. And I think us starting in September as a committee, rather than coming in November and the steep learning curve that we were affected with in trying to understand that. But when you don't sleep and live and dream a budget like this, you have to rely heavily on you and Ms. Carlin, and I do, and Mr. Kennedy in the past.
Sure. And
it sounds like I'm critical, but it's just, I don't live and breathe this. So
no, it doesn't. First of all, your questions aren't silly as you suggested. And secondly, we certainly don't feel defensive. I mean, you and the board have to ask questions. Again, your responsibility is fiscal oversight. And but please do know that the primary purpose of ESSER was COVID recovery and support. And so we built into school-based plans with principals, knowing that the grant would sunset, processes to allow them to assess the effectiveness of whatever they determined that they needed to implement, whether that be a tutor to help do pull out with small groups of children who were negatively impacted by COVID, whether that was an interventionist, whether that was some sort of extended day support. Principals are again aware that this pot of money sunsets, and that if they can use data to support that beyond the extent of COVID, that, you know, their budgets will have to be adjusted to allow for continuation of any kind of services. So again, I know it's a lot of money, and we are all preparing for the cliff of that. But again, we will only try to maintain positions or programs that have demonstrated through quantitative measure effectiveness. And in doing so, we understand that other areas of our budget will have to shift or be reduced so that we can maintain continuity of services, for lack of a better word. So, I mean, again, I really appreciate the questions. I just wanted to make sure I understood your understanding of ESSER, and try to reassure you that our school-based principals, at least, are aware of the sunset and are planning accordingly.
And we all acknowledge this is a living, breathing document that changes on a daily basis, and their projections based on historicals, and things can happen. As Mr. Calhoun has rightfully put out, the legal, one of the things we really do need to look at some point is our legal potential liability, and making sure that we have enough in there to cover that. So because that always seems in this day and age to be one of the sore points in any budget. But the goal, as has been stated by the board and definitely this committee, is to try to continue to work on increasing the ability to hold on to staff and hire staff.
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead, Ms.
Hello.
Temple. We're
Hi.
listening, Dr. Temple.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Since I feel that this discussion today and this meeting was held because I brought up the issue of properly paying all of our employees, whether they're teachered or non-classified, I just want to say, based on what I'm hearing today, that it still seems to me that we can address the needs of all of our employees. The 10.3 mil, it seems like there's enough justification that it's still a balanced budget, that it's not impacting our fund balance. And I think that it's very important to send a message to all of our staff that they are important to the achievement of all of our students. And so I still want to advocate for us to look at the 5% COLA for our non-classified employees, because I think it's important. And also, one observation I made last night, there were only 5 written comments. There were no people in the audience protesting the budget. And so I think that we have raised enough, I think we've raised enough concerns in the community to show that we are not supporting all of our employees in this educational system. And it's time that we do that. Now, we can operate on fear, wondering what's going to happen, multi-year. And I think that's good information to have, but we can always make adjustments in the future. But I think right now it's very important for us to support our employees, all of our employees.
Ms. Carlin, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Same way we were looking at the fund balance, and you say that we may not end up using the full budgeted use of fund balance that we've done in the past. How do you see that with like the ESSER stabilization? Do you think we will, even though we're budgeting for that 22 million, do you think we will use all of that 22 million?
It is too early to tell. I'm still waiting to, we're still working through the $19.6 million for the ESSER bonus. So honestly, it's just too early to tell. From me, from a finance perspective, the academic side, they might know, but it's too early for me to tell from the finance side, unfortunately, at this point.
Sure.
Yeah, really quickly.
Do the ESSER funds expire?
Do they
Yes.
expire?
24.
Next September. They have to all be spent by next September. There will be no additional funding for positions after next September. Currently.
That is
Really?
correct.
Yeah. Really quickly, I have just a quick comment and just question because I think it's perspective was helpful to understand this well too. Number one, the fund balance projection and what was actually used is tremendously helpful. And I think that it gives a good perspective of things as well. But I think it'd be helpful, and I don't know, I don't want to bring up bad memories, number one. But I think it'd be helpful to just give a little background to the committee around 16 and prior as to what was happening there. And then steps that were taken by the board staff to correct that. Because I think that was obviously something that got a lot of news, but I think we've done a lot to correct all of those dependency on the finance. But still, I think perspective for everyone on the floor would be helpful.
Yeah, I think so. I wasn't here during that time. I was at Berkeley, but I still stayed in touch with a lot of people from Charleston, so I knew a little bit about what was going on, and it was disheartening. Couple things that I was well aware of that was, first of all, the school district did not sign off on local tax revenues with the county auditor's office, which is something we do. We meet quarterly, if not sooner. I know we talk more than that. And so there was an issue with revenues a couple years in a row where the district over budgeted or over projected revenues. There were some TIFs going on that were impacting those numbers that the district was not aware of. So that was one issue. Another issue is we were not keeping up with vacancies like we do now. And there was a lot more autonomy, if you will, at the school level. And unfortunately, a lot of that got pulled in with the creation of a staff allocate, a different staff allocation committee and things like that. Another thing that happened, and of course that impacted expenditures. And there were a couple other expenditure surprises. Dawn, do you by chance? I know you weren't here either, but Lisa Sizzler was, and I mean, unfortunately she's on vacation. She lived through that, and it was horrible. And so one of the things that came out of that, it was the monthly financial update and then the multi-year projections, which we pretty much stay on top of. That is something that we do and present to the Audit and Finance Committee regularly. Mr. Kinney, do you have anything you want to add? Or I know Bill was here during that time. Anita was here during that time.
Yeah,
Ann was here.
Yeah. So no, I was not here, obviously, but I certainly did a lot of inquiries and read all the reports associated with that time period. And so this slide that's up here right now, this fund balance, the use of fund balance versus the budget amount. The slope of that blue line is not arbitrary by any means. So if you go back to the previous slide that showed the history of the fund balance and what Mr. Haslett is talking about, even if you go back beyond FY14 to the left there, the fund balance was much higher. So you can see between 14, 15, and 16 that dip there, and that dip down to that dangerous level of 12.2 million was associated with what Mr. Haslett brought up. So for instance, 12.2 million. So we just paid out $7 million of liability that we weren't aware of out of the fund balance. Had we not had the fund balance that we have now back then, and that liability hit us, the district would have been in much worse shape than what it was with $18 million loss. So as you see from 17 on up to 23, the buildup of that fund balance, it was to make sure that we did not get into a situation that's on the left side of the slide. And then we go back to the next slide, the one that has the slope I talked about. As we built up the fund balance up towards FY21, and we began to manage the financials much more tightly as we monitor this, the decrease in this line, in this blue line, the slope of that line, is also deliberate because they're recognizing that we didn't need as much fund balance. And so when we think about financial planning and financial projections, then in order to work these lines out into the future, it's really problematic if we add additional expenditures to the budget that's being contemplated right now without doing this multi-year out-year projections, because we know what's going to happen is that this yellow line here is going to come above the blue line if we're not very careful, and then the district will find itself in financial straits again. So it has to be monitored pretty carefully, both the actuals and how we do the projections. And so Jackie and her team then have strategies in place to do that type of monitoring. But part of that is making sure that we lock down a certain parameters, and that's where the board comes in. The board has to decide how much revenue it's going to use, how much expenditure it's going to use every year, and then we can use that. The staff can use that from the basis to figure out how to inform the board and the committee of what might happen in the future.
I think it's helpful to have that perspective on it because, we're looking at this and, it's great to see in bar graph format like it. And I'm a visual person, so that was substantial to see. But I think that anybody who doesn't have that historical perspective didn't realize the controls weren't in place prior to this. The drivers as to what caused that might look at that and just start questioning the 16 and prior on that, for public case standpoint. And I think this is great. Some of these testaments of the work done by everybody on this to improve the controls, we take care of fiscal health of the district as well too. But I think I was coming in right at 16 effectively when that was occurring. Just was kind of a deer in headlights at the time and saying what is so thanks to everyone on that, by the way. So.
Can we go back one more to the slide before? Yeah, great. Because, once again, when I look at the history of the millage increases, which is really what we're here to consider, I still see that, and this is a credit to staff, obviously, and to what Ms. Carlin said, extra steps were in place. When you look at the millage increases in 2016, it was, 3.8. 2017, it was, 2.49. So I still think we are obviously, whatever we are doing as a staff, the accountability for budget management, we have to take that into account. We have to continue that. But, I'm not really feeling the love for a millage increase. When I look at the historical values, I see this going, and I see what we've done well on the fund balances. But this is definitely a testament to some good financial management, as Mr. Kennedy has been stating in the past, and Ms. Carlin has been adequately and showing. So it's impressive. But I have to agree with staff. I am concerned without having that multi-year projection. I think the 8.3, I think is well done. I think you've done a great job getting it to that point. I think the board did a good job in, raising their questions. I'll be interested to hear what further questions they may have. Are there any more questions from the committee to staff? Well, I really do commend Ms. Carlin for you putting this together in such a short period of time. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one more. Keep going.
Oh, that's okay. No, this is something that our HR group put together which is just a historical overview of how we've given increases to classified hourly staff as well as administrators. And I just thought that this would be something good to refer back to, probably as we start talking about not only this budget, but next year's budget, which is right around the corner.
So Ms. Carlin, what do you recommend for us right now?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that.
Sure.
I just knowing what we don't know right now about adding another $5 million to the budget. I understand the concerns with staffing and the increases that other companies are giving. I do understand that. However, what I don't want to do is put us in a situation where we've overextended ourselves and that we have to look at possible not only reducing budgets again, because we've done some drastic budget reductions this year on the non-salary pieces, but I don't want us to get in a situation where we are looking at reductions in force. Those kind of things are those are hard to go through with employees. I mean, our employees, what happened just a few weeks ago was really, really hard on employees, and they didn't know what was going on. And I don't want to see our district go through that again. So I would rather be cautious. We don't have to make a decision today on the increase. I recommend we stay the course with the 8.3 millage increase. And with the second reading that was presented yesterday, give staff time to go back and look at what this additional 2.5% cost of living adjustment for the other staff that just came up recently. Give us a chance to see what that would do to our budget, and just go from there. I don't think we would miss the opportunity of raising millage to do it. I feel like the 8.3 mil increase is enough for our district and for our taxpayers.
So when we're talking about the COLAs and for the classified hourly staff, have we looked at using a set minimum amount versus a percentage? Because when you start talking about 2.5% on some of these hourly employees, they do not see an increase. If their insurance increases or their
Retirement.
retirement increases, you essentially have given them nothing. And sometimes it comes back where their income may be even less, their take home may be even less. So have we looked at doing a minimum amount for that group so that at least they feel as if they are receiving some type of increase? I think at that salary level, when you're going with percentages, unless you're doing a really significant percentage increase, they're not seeing anything. They're not feeling. And so now you have a group of employees that really feel disenfranchised because they're not seeing the increase that are feeling the increase. So while we think we're giving them something, are we really giving them anything to incentivize them?
Right, because of the state mandated increases that impact them as well. Yes.
And thanks, though, Ms. Stamp. So we're talking about the 2.5%, and I would I understand and would agree with you. Although this table right here doesn't show any dollar amounts, so I don't have those in my head rather. But in addition to the 2.5%, this category of employees also receive a step increase. So just by the mere fact they have an additional year of experience, there's a dollar amount associated with that, plus the 2.5%.
And that's why, I think compensation studies and evaluations are so important, because, market's one thing, but you really need to look at, the compensation as a major factor. Any further questions from the committee regarding the presentation?
Mr. Grabowski, could I make a comment on the non-teacher group and the 97%?
Absolutely, Mr. Brickman.
And I know you've talked about another salary study or whatever that might look like, but if we could set a goal, and maybe Jackie could look at the cost, my department could do that as well with her. What if we went to 98% of market for 2024? then 99% for 2025, and then 100% for 2026. So a 3-year plan. So our employees know that we're serious about this, that we're going to, move forward and take care of employees. Mr. Kennedy's right about steps. We just increased teachers out to step 40 when they were at 30 last year. Our non-teachers go to step 30. We were asking to go to step 31 for next year. It could be that we start to add steps for our more experienced people. I'm very careful how I word that because I fall in that category. But our more experienced people that we want to retain, and I think are necessary to retain. So that's something, I don't know what the cost would be, but we certainly could look into that.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I really do. It gives us a chance as at least this board to take ownership, from the beginning as to the evaluation, the research, and the goal.
So are
Definitely favorable.
So are you all saying that we could pass this budget on Monday and then we still could look at some possible increases for our non-classified employees afterwards? And I guess the question I also had was my thought was that in terms of the millage, that you could approve it now. Can you increase the millage at other times, like say in January, if we thought things were better? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, that you can't.
So if I may respond, so first of all, Dr. Temple, just to that last question, Dr. Temple, we can't do a millage increase in the middle of the year. So we have one opportunity. The board has one opportunity to do the millage increase. The reason being is that the county audit office sends out tax bills at a certain point in the year, and and so that point is coming up this fall. And so for us, for the district, and not just the district, it's for the all taxing entities in the county. That we have to have to the county auditor's office around the end of August, the 1st of September, exactly what our tax increases are going to be and what our taxes are going to be for the upcoming year, because the county auditor's office needs time to calculate the tax bills. And as Jackie indicated a few minutes ago, we and the auditors have to sign off that we are in agreement on what those increases or changes tax rates are going to be. So for us here in the district, we're running out of time. It's the middle of July. I would say that from my personal experience is that if we're going to have a budget, a fiscal year 24 budget that's not a continuing resolution, this coming Monday is the absolute deadline for that to occur. If we go into August, we're going to put ourselves in a situation where we're not going to be able to comply with our agreements with the county auditors, and then that's a non-starter. We have to have that in place. Now, what I'm hearing Bill Brickman say is that much like we did with teachers a few years ago, that he's proposing to the school board and to the superintendent that we do a 3-year phase in of getting employees up to non-teachers up to the 100%. Now, I don't know what a 1% for 1998 for FY24 would be, but Jackie, you should be able to calculate that right now, I think, hopefully. So it's 1% of that. So right now, to get to 100% is additional $5 million and something. So whatever that mill is, just 1 point something mil. So it'd probably be, somewhere certainly less than a mil. So we could consider that. I say we. I'm not talking about we. I'm talking about the board can consider that. But beyond that, I don't see where staff would make a recommendation to the board that we go beyond that, because we don't know what that looks like in the future. And then one other point that's really, really critical here is our school-based staff. We know that it's been before the pandemic, before we had the last time we had a review with the staff allocations out to the schools. And we know that that's going to be a problem next year when the ESSER dollars go away. And we've got to be able to think about that also from a fiscal standpoint. So to do anything beyond that, what Bill suggested for right now, we'll be operating without the proper financial projections, and then that puts the district at risk from a fiscal standpoint.
And Don, just kind of quick numbers to it looks like it's about $1.9 million more to the budget for to go to 98%.
Any further questions from the committee to the staff? Well, then I would like to make a motion that we proceed forward to the second reading of the budget with the recommendation that we hold the millage rate at 8.3%.
I'd like to have some discussion before we vote on that. And maybe someone can go on mute. I remain concerned on the fund balance topic, and just to reiterate, two points. When we talked about what the minimums are required for fund balance, recall that those are minimums. Those are sort of low end of what is deemed sort of acceptable. That is different from what is optimal, what is targeted. And I think our fund balance, we should be targeting something in the neighborhood of what our credit rating peer set is. And our fund balance percentage is below 15%, and the peers are at 26 or higher percent. So number one, I think our target is different from a minimum. Second point I would make is that if you go back to that bar chart that shows the fund balance, and it shows us getting up to 167 million in fund balance, that's not actually our projection based on our current budget, because our current budget assumes we actually draw back down to 145.6 million. I hear the comments that we haven't, that we've been able to operate better than budget, and we've been able to beat our budget the past few years. But just think about that. Our projection is actually 145 million. We would have to beat our budget by 13 million to just hold our fund balance flat year over year. And that ignores the fact that our expenses and revenues are increasing. So as a percentage, we'd still be declining. And I know I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. Moody's has indicated that we are below our peers on fund balance, and that they're concerned if they were to downgrade us, it would be because we would be reducing that fund balance further. And I appreciate all the success we've had since 2016 in getting us into a better spot. But one of the things that we didn't do that helped us do so well is we didn't count on either beating budget, essentially. And now we are trying to count on beating our budget just to hold our fund balance where it is, which is frankly not adequate relative to our peers. So I think it's irresponsible and imprudent of our board to have a budget that is going to, when we know we need to increase our fund balance, to have a budget that reduces it by 10%. And I fully respect and appreciate the staff. I understand you have a different opinion. And I know you're between a rock and a hard place and trying to satisfy a constituency that none of us want to raise taxes. I get that. But our objective, I think, for this committee is to make sure that we operate in a financially prudent way for the long term.
So I very much appreciate it.
John, I think you're muted.
No, I was just saying that I understand Mr. Griffith's perspective and very much appreciate that perspective.
So, Mr. Griffith.
Sorry, the mic cut out again. Can you say it again? Sorry.
What do you suggest that we should do? Raise the millage to the 10.3?
I think, yes.
I still go back onto the history. I still go back onto the history of what we've used in the past to get where we are. And I stand corrected. On 2017, we actually added a 15.6 millage rate. And 2021, we didn't have any millage rate at all. But I don't feel comfortable. You know, we're asking for an 8.3, which will be the second highest millage rate increase. I don't know. I don't have the future years, but I'm pretty sure if we go back with the change of law, this will be the second highest millage increase ever. And I just get the feeling that next year we're going to be put into a space again to go back into the millage rate to try to accomplish, you know, our further goals. So I think staff's done a great job at the 8.3. I think that was a compromise, you know, from the 7.1, from the 10.3 that was discussed with the board at the first reading. So I still, based upon what I've heard today and seen today without having the proper financials, I mean, the COLA issue is kind of interesting because as I understand it, it's since we control COLA, it's something we can always look at and add anytime during the year because that's on us. It's not a requirement by the state. So I did find that, but I don't feel comfortable with raising the millage rate past the 8.3. I think at the board meeting, it was very clear. You know, I don't see any radical changes here that would justify going to the 10.3 with the understanding that possibly we're going to have to go back again to accomplish what we're really trying to do is get more teachers. And then once we have a little more information that we can support it, a higher COLA for the non-certified.
So, Mr. Grabowski, so you're comfortable with us reducing our fund balance percentage?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I think you're on a projection. I don't think we can actually say it's actually happening. Based upon what I'm seeing and what I'm seeing here, you know, it's a historical, you know, let's hope, let's see. I think there's a lot that's going to be happening in the next year that's very important. But until we have an organizational chart, until we, you know, there's just so much that has to be done, I think, as a board, as an audit and finance committee, as to understanding this budget and moving forward. No, because I just know we're going to have to be hitting the millage rate again. And I'd rather get back onto track to where we're only going up at 3, 4 rather than 8, 10, you know, each time. Because I think it's going to be a big one next year once we finally get the right documentation in place and understanding of what we're going to need to stay sustainable and competitive.
I will say, Mr. Grabowski, the huge increase that you mentioned of 15 point something mil back in 15, 16 timeframe.
Yeah.
The only reason why that occurred, you know, neither Jack nor I were here, but we know why that occurs because the years preceding that, there was no millage increase and expenditures were you know, costs were going up. And so the state's funding formula going back decades assumes that counties like Charleston, who have the wherewithal from a property value standpoint, will pick up a bigger share of educating its children versus a county that's doesn't, you know, a poor county economically, that is, that doesn't have the resources. And so the state funding formula attends to that and allows us each year, the district each year, to raise millage to support that structure.
Anyway, so I made a motion. Is there a second by any other committee member? Hearing none, the board will entertain a second motion.
I would move that we increase the mill. Sorry, I'm going back to the page.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
I would move that we increase the mills to 10.3, but hold off on the additional cost. Hold off on the additional compensation increase for non-teacher salary until we have an opportunity to go through this study and develop what we would hope to be a 3-year plan to get to that 100% market. But that we do that promptly, that we try to do it in a way that doesn't take a full year to at least do the assessment and understand what the real costs are and what the 3-year model looks like.
Is there a second?
Can you restate the motion? So
I would move that we approve a 10.3 mil increase, but it does not include the additional compensation increase for non-teacher salary that was included in that last column, and that we work with the staff to revisit a compensation study promptly with the goal of working out a 3-year plan to get those non-teacher staff up to market.
Okay, so what was in the last column? Was that the 2.5% COLA, or was there an additional amount in the last column? What amounts are you talking about for the non-teacher increases?
It was the 5.5 COLA increase for non-teachers. So the last column was 10.3 with a 5.5 COLA increase. So just to be more concise, the motion is for a 10.3 mil increase with a 2.5 COLA, and then I guess we can make it after we get through this motion. I think we should separate it to make the second motion during the 3-year study.
I agree.
That's
I
reasonable.
think Darren's correct. I think we need to get the millage rate motion clear, and then the ongoing steps,
All right, I'll second that.
Griffin, can you reword your motion?
The 10.3 mil increase, period, with no change to the non-teacher salary. No change from what's in the second reading budget.
Do you have a second?
That was a second by Mr. Du.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All those against, say nay. And I'm going to record my nay. Did you hear me?
Can you all hear me? It's a lot of static somewhere.
Mr. Duke, there you go.
So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yays and 1 nay. So a 5-1. Motion passes. To the second motion. Kent, you want to?
Yeah, I don't know if we need a formal motion to do this, but if we do, we can. I would. Do we need a motion to do this, or is this just a discussion that we want to ask the staff to?
I think because we're asking the staff to do something, I think the board's got to approve it, and I think it's just,
So
I think it's wise to advise it through them that this is something that came out as a recommendation from Audit and Finance.
You cut out, but I think I got the end of it. So I would motion that we ask the staff to work with this committee to
Finance, and then we voted on it.
To work with this committee to select to go through the process of performing a new market study with the objective of bringing the non-teacher professionals to market compensation at over a 3-year period.
Second.
Hearing the second, all in favor, say aye.
Excuse me,
I'm sorry,
in,
Ms. Stamp.
in Mr. Griffin's, can we remove the word professional and just say the non? So that we make sure that we're inclusive.
Completely accept that
of-
friendly amendment. Completely.
Tarina, you have that recorded? Ms. Haskell?
Yes.
Okay. With the friendly amendment, do I have a second?
I'll
Second.
second it.
Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion pass. All against? Any against? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. With that being said, there are no further items on the agenda. Ms. Haskell, our next scheduled meeting is when? Is it August 1st
August 1st,
at 2:30?
2 p.m.
2 p.m. 2 p.m. August 1st is our next meeting. Is there any further, having no further business, I would make a motion that the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Good questions. And I appreciate staff. Staff did an extremely, Jackie, I know you've been under a lot of pressure. I think your presentation was excellent. And Mr. Kennedy, I appreciate your thoughts in on this, on the historical side of it.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Appreciate everybody's input. Thank you very much. Everyone, have a good